Yo, what's up guys, Alpha, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of a deck that I've recently used to hit rank 1 with on the Arena ladder. As you can see from the untapped screenshot, I'm currently 40-9 with this deck, so it's been performing really well for me. And now before I get into it, there's going to be an MTG zone link down in the description. If you click on that, I'll have the full deck list there that you can import into Arena if you want to try the deck out for yourself. And I'm also in the process of writing a full text article about this deck for MTG Zone Premium that will have more details, a full sideboard guide, how I change the deck for best of one, and some tips and tricks to help you play the deck as well. So as soon as that's finished and up, I'll link that down in the description as well. But anyway, with that all out of the way, this is my Rakdos Crucias Anvil deck in Alchemy. Now, I've covered Rakdos Anvil on the channel a couple of times, so if you're already familiar with the core of the deck, you know, the staple cards like Anvil, Brushstroke, Fable, Bloodtithe Harvester, etc., I'm going to leave a timestamp down in the description so you can skip the explanation of what I consider to be the staple cards, and then we can move on to the more interesting and slightly less staple cards like Crucias, Invoke, Despair, etc. after that timestamp. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with this deck, it's basically a mid-range sacrifice deck that either wins in two ways. You're either going to pull ahead on card advantage because you're very good at grinding into the mid to late game. You can produce card advantage off cards like Research Desk, Deadly Dispute, or Invoke Despair. So some games you'll just win by getting ahead on card advantage. The other main way that you win with this deck is with direct damage. We have a ton of ways to deal direct damage to the opponent of stuff like Oni-Cult, Anvil, Sanguine Brushstroke, Invoke Despair. And so oftentimes, you know, you'll get in for chip damage by attacking wherever you can, but oftentimes you're just going to finish the opponent off with direct damage, which means you have really good reach in the late game. So you can often win without even needing to attack because you have so many ways to deal direct damage, which is really important because it enables you to win even if you're behind on board. So the two main cards in the deck are Oni-Cult, Anvil, and Sanguine Brushstroke. So Oni-Cult, Anvil, 2-mana artifact, and once it's in play, if an artifact leaves the battlefield during your turn, you create a 1/1 artifact creature token, and then you can tap it and sacrifice an artifact to drain the opponent for 1. So we have tons of ways to enable the Anvil. We have Mishra's Research Desk, which we can sacrifice to its own ability. We have Bloodtithe Harvester and Sanguine Brushstroke, which both produce blood tokens that we can use to trigger the Anvil. We've also got treasure tokens that we can make off Deadly Dispute, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, and Crucias. So we have a ton of ways to enable the Anvil. So once we have this in play, we're almost always going to be able to just produce 1/1s every single turn, which is really good. You know, in every matchup, these 1/1s are useful, especially against aggro. You know, you can use them to chump block against the aggressive decks, sacrifice the tokens in response to drain the opponent for 1, apply direct damage to the opponent, buff your life total a little bit. Even against the slower decks, you can start using it to attack. Like I said, you know, you often win by draining the opponent out, so getting in for damage in the early game off the 1/1s that Anvil produces is really nice. So steady stream of 1/1s off this is great, and the ability to drain the opponent for 1 every single turn is another way that you can just produce direct damage to apply pressure to the opponent's life total. Next up, we've got Sanguine Brushstroke, 3-mana enchantment, and it produces a Blood Artist and a Blood Token. And then whenever you sacrifice a Blood Token, each opponent loses 1 life. So the Blood Artist that it produces is definitely the biggest appeal of this card. In general, Blood Artist is such a powerful card at dealing direct damage to the opponent, particularly against other creature decks. You know, if you have a Blood Artist in play and creatures are trading off in combat, Blood Artist deals so much damage to the opponent and also buffers your life total, which can be very relevant against the aggressive decks like Mono Red and Goblins as well. Even if the opponent doesn't have creatures that's trading off in combat, this pairs very nicely with Oni-Cult Anvil. You know, if you have an Anvil and a Blood Artist in play, every time you sacrifice your 1/1s to the Anvil, not only do you drain the opponent for 1 off the Anvil, you also drain the opponent for 1 off Blood Artist as well. And if you have multiple Anvils or multiple Blood Artists in play, it really starts that up. So Blood Artist, absolutely sick. And then you also get to deal direct damage to the opponent by sacrificing your blood tokens. Now, we produce blood tokens off the Brushstroke and the Bloodtithe Harvester, so once we have a Brushstroke in play, sacrificing the blood tokens to stuff like Deadly Dispute, Anvil, or just to our own ability to loot a card deals direct damage to the opponent as well. And oftentimes, if you have multiple Brushstrokes in play, you can often just finish the opponent off by sacrificing your pool of blood tokens to deal the last few points of damage. So Brushstroke and Anvil, very nice at giving us some board presence and just dealing a ton of consistent direct damage to the opponent. Then we've got Bloodtithe Harvester, so this produces blood tokens like the Brushstroke and can also be used as kind of a flexible removal spell. This card is super important to get down as early as you can. You know, typically if you have Bloodtithe Harvester, you just want to play this on turn 2 ahead of something like Oni-Cult Anvil to have the option to use the removal spell, because you need to untap with this to be able to kill something, and there are a ton of targets that are very important to be able to kill. You know, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, being able to kill the 2/2 token before it attacks and produces a treasure token is really important. You know, in the mirror match, being able to kill Blood Artist is really important. There's a ton of smaller creatures in decks like Goblins as well, so being able to use this as a removal spell is really nice. But just a 3/2 body for 2 mana is also decent at being able to attack the opponent. It pairs very nicely with Reflection of Kiki-Jiki, because if you get to untap with it, you can start copying the Blood Tithe Harvester, which then allows you to essentially get a free removal spell every single turn, which is really nice. So Blood Tithe Harvester, super flexible. Blood Token allows you to get Anvil online, and also works as a removal spell as well. Really, really sick card. Then we've got 4 copies of Fable of the Mirror Breaker. So this is another card that I consider staple, and is honestly one of the best cards in the whole format. So Chapter 1 creates a 2/2, gives you some board presence. The 2/2 attacking, producing a treasure token is really, really huge. First of all, because we're running 4 Invoke Despair in the deck, which I'll explain in a little bit, but being able to ramp into this on turn 4 is really, really important, and the treasure token off the 2/2 really helps to do that. It also produces, the treasure token enables you to get something online for Anvil, so if you don't have another treasure or another artifact, you can just produce the artifact off the 2/2 when it attacks. And in general, you're never going to run out of mana. You have so much stuff to do in this deck that you're never really going to run out of stuff to do with your mana because of cards like Mishra's Research Desk, Invoke Despair, Deadly Dispute. So the extra mana that you get off this is always going to be useful no matter what situation you're in. And then Chapter 2, the ability to loot away cards and draw is really, really nice at just enabling you to ditch dead cards, and enables you to go positive on card advantage if you're pitching Mishra's Research Desk, because you can play it from the graveyard. And just in general, just helps you dig for lands if you need them. Like I said, being able to play turn 4 Invoke Despair is really nice. So you need to hit your 4th land on curve to be able to do that, and looting helps you do that. But just in general, helps you to dig for whatever cards you need. And then Reflection of Kiki-Jiki, a really, really strong kind of late game engine. If the opponent lets you untap with this, being able to copy Blood Tithe Harvester, like I said, allows you to get an additional removal spell every single turn. And being able to copy Blood Artist is really, really nice as well, because it just enables you to do these turns where you can just deal insane amounts of damage to the opponent if you have it combined with stuff like Oni-Cult Anvil as well. So Fable's such a key card in the deck. And then the last card that I would kind of consider a staple in this deck is Go for the Throat. 2 mana instant, kills anything that isn't an artifact creature. Just destroy target non-artifact creature. The reason that I consider this staple is because of Shieldred. So Shieldred is a card that is basically impossible to beat if you let it stay in play for a long time with this deck, because you oftentimes want to, your whole deck revolves around dealing direct damage, and Shieldred just completely undoes that if you just let it stay in play. So Go for the Throat, really, really important at being able to kill Shieldred. Now, there are some artifact creatures that see play, but in general, Go for the Throat is able to kill most of them, and Infernal Grasp is the other option that you have at 2 mana instant speed interaction, and the 2 life that you lose off that really adds up, especially against the aggro deck, so I much prefer Go for the Throat. So those are the cards that I would consider staple. Now moving on to kind of the newer innovations to the deck. First of which is Crucias, Titan of the Waves. So this is a new card from the latest Alchemy set, and honestly, I think this card is absolutely insane. So this is a 3 mana 3/3, and at the beginning of your end step, you may discard a card. If you do, create a treasure token and choose Ambitious or Expedient. If you choose Ambitious, seek a card with greater mana value than the discarded card. If you choose Expedient, seek a card with lesser mana value than the discarded card. So the reason that this card is so powerful, just at a base rate, it just constantly fixes the worst card in your hand into a better one, and you get to pick which direction you want to go in. So, say you need a land drop and you have a research desk, you can pitch the research desk and choose Expedient to guarantee hitting a land. If you have a Deadly Dispute, you can try and find something like more powerful, like one of your 3-drops or an Invoke Despair. And the fact that it also ramps you is insane. It's very comparable to Fable of the Mirror Breaker, because it does kind of similar things, but I honestly think that Crucias is better on turn 3 if the opponent isn't holding up instant speed interaction. If the opponent taps out going into your turn 3, I generally prefer playing Crucias because you get the ramp immediately. The weakness, if you can call it that, of Fable of the Mirror Breaker is that the opponent can kill the 2/2 before it attacks, so you don't get the ramp. Now, obviously, you don't get the Reflection of Kiki-Jiki with Crucias, but if it stays in play, it just completely snowballs the game so much. Even if this didn't produce a treasure token, I still think it would see play. But the fact it does, it can immediately ramp you to 5 mana on turn 4, and then just, consistently over the course of the game, just keep ramping up the treasure tokens, which you're always going to have uses for. Sacrifice them to the Anvil, enables you to unearth your research desk and dig for more cards. So generically, it's just a really, really powerful card anyway, but the thing that makes it really, really good is that you can set up your deck in a way that it tutors for stuff. So if you have a look at the deck, we don't have any 4-drops, and we have 4 Invoke Despair. So the reason that Crucias is so powerful with Invoke Despair is if you play Crucias on turn 3 and you discard another 3-drop, so like a Brushstroke, a Fable, or another Crucias, not only does it guaranteed tutor the Invoke Despair, but it also ramps to it because it produces a treasure token. So you can go Crucias on turn 3, discard one of your 3-drops, it produces a treasure token, and tutors up Invoke Despair, which is so sick. This interaction is so strong. And the main reason, while we're on the topic, that I'm really high on Invoke Despair right now is just because it deals with so many problematic permanents that Anvil usually struggles to deal with. So, creatures that Anvil struggles to deal with, stuff like Graveyard Trespasser or Lae'zel, for example, that have protection or kind of insulation against single target removal. Invoke Despair is great there. The main reason why I'm really interested in Invoke Despair right now, though, is because of enchantments in the format. So, Fable of the Mirror Breaker is absolutely everywhere right now, and it's very difficult for you to interact with favourably. You know, you often need to kill the 2/2 or the opponent gets ahead on mana, which is particularly an issue against the Gender Reanimator deck. You know, if they can start producing treasure tokens off the Fable, then they can start hardcasting their reanimation targets like Titan of Industry, which is a real problem. And you also want to kill the Reflection of Kiki-Jiki, which requires 2 pieces of interaction, so it's very difficult to interact with Fable favourably. Invoke Despair gives you a clean way to do that, and it's particularly important that we can play this on turn 4, because if we're on the play, we can go Crucias on turn 3, tutor up the Invoke Despair, and then if the opponent plays Fable, we can just invoke immediately, stop them getting value. Even if you're going second, you can still Invoke Despair before the Fable flips into Reflection, which guarantees killing it unless they have another enchantment. Other enchantments that are really problematic, you know, stuff that we struggle to grind against, like Cabaretti Revels against the Naya Life Gain deck, or Goblin Influx Array against Mono Red Goblins. Those sorts of cards are very difficult to beat because oftentimes we don't kill quickly, especially post sideboard if the opponent brings in more life gain against us, and those sorts of cards are very difficult to beat on card advantage. So Invoke Despair killing Revels, particularly because we can play it on turn 4, so we can kill Revels before they get any value off it if we're on the play, and killing Goblin Influx Array to just stop the opponent getting value every turn is really huge. Temporary Lockdown is another card that's very good against Anvil, so being able to kill that is huge. And also Anvil as a deck isn't very good at dealing with Planeswalkers either, you know, particularly stuff like Tasha that makes it very difficult to interact with because all of your creatures are such low power in general, or low toughness, I guess, is more relevant. Stuff like Minsk and Boo is often difficult for us to deal with as well. So Invoke Despair, dealing with all of them, and being able to tutor it off the Crucias is so important. So I'm a really big fan of this card, and that's the main reason why I'm running 4 copies. Even outside of Crucias, we also have other ways to ramp into it. Like I said, you know, the 2/2 off Fable of the Mirror Breaker producing treasure tokens allows us to play it on turn 4. And we also have 4 copies of Deadly Dispute, which allows us to ramp into Invoke Despair on turn 4 as well. So I think, you know, there are certain cards in the format that just snowball if they're left unchecked. Fable of the Mirror Breaker, Cabaretti Revels, and I guess Goblin Influx Array to a lesser extent. But those are the key ones. And Invoke Despair, whilst being a generically powerful card, also just shuts off those very snowbally starts from the opponent, if that makes sense. So while we're on the topic of Deadly Dispute, this is a card that obviously works very nicely in Anvil in general. Now, I don't think it's a staple necessarily, because I have run other cards instead that I think do a pretty good job. You know, I think Phyrexian Dragon Engine is a card that is probably more generically powerful than Deadly Dispute because it's better against the aggro decks and completely refuels you. You know, drawing 3 cards when you're empty-handed is really huge. I've also been trying Jund builds with stuff like Sarenth Stillseeker in this place, which is also, I think, potentially better than Deadly Dispute. But in this particular build, because I'm running 4 Invoke Despair, you know, this is the key card or the key angle I'm trying to build around with this deck. Deadly Dispute, because it ramps us into Invoke Despair on turn 4, is really key. And obviously, it's just a great card in Anvil in general anyway. And then we've also got Mishra's Research Desk. This is a relatively new addition to the deck, and I'm so high on this card in general. You know, I think there's... You know, it's kind of comparable to Experimental Synthesizer, but this is just so much better. So the biggest issue I had with Experimental Synthesizer is that it's just so easy to brick with. And the difference in this, you know, the fact you get to choose 1 out of 2 cards is really huge. But the most important thing is that you can play them until the end of your next turn. So the chances of you bricking on this are so low, and you get 2 activations off it. So, you know, even though ideally you want to be playing this and then activating it and then unearthing it again so you get full value off it, it's really like completely fine to go Research Desk on turn 1 into Anvil, sacrifice it and then unearth it later, or Research Desk on turn 1 into Deadly Dispute, sacrifice it and then unearth it later. You know, that's a perfectly good sequence, and this is just such a powerful card because there's a lot of decks in the format right now that are very grindy. The format seems very mid-range focused. You know, there's Grixis mid-range, Esper mid-range, Rakdos mid-range, other Anvil decks are also kind of mid-range as well. And this is the sort of card that will just completely pull you ahead. You know, if you have a Research Desk and the opponent doesn't, you know, you get to look 4 cards deep just off 1 card, and, you know, in the mid to late game, you're going to have a ton of mana, you know, particularly if we're getting treasures off Fable and Crucias. So Mr.'s Research Desk just really helps you to pull ahead and enables your early starts with Deadly Dispute and Anvil as well. Then mana base wise, nothing too special going on here. 24 lands has felt like a good amount, you know, particularly with Invoke Despair. We really want to be hitting our 4th land on curve as often as possible, so I could potentially see an argument to going up to 25, but we have so many ways to draw in the early game, you know, Dispute, Fable and Crucias all, you know, well, I guess Dispute and Fable help dig for lands, and we also have blood tokens off the Harvester and the Brushstroke that allow us to dig for lands as well as you know, Research Desk you can activate in the early game to dig for lands as well. So 24 has felt like a good amount overall. We're running the 8 good black-red dual lands. Forsaken Crossroads works really nicely as well. You know, if you're on the draw, just gives you an untapped land, fixes your mana quite well as well. Then Takenuma and Sokenzan are free to run as one, obviously. And then basics, I've gone slightly more heavy on black in this build because of Invoke Despair, which is, you know, we have to be careful not to go too low on the red sources though, because we do have Brotherhood's End in the sideboard. But overall, this mana base has been working out really nicely. You do need to be very thoughtful about Invoke Despair when you're choosing your type on Forsaken Crossroads. You know, unless you have to put it on red, it's almost always better to put it on black so that you can consistently cast Invoke Despair. But outside of that, I've been really, really impressed with this deck. I've tried out a bunch of different Anvil shells. You know, I've tried out multiple Jund shells. I've tried out loads and loads of different ideas with Anvil, and I am tempted. I think within the next few days, I'm probably going to be posting a separate video covering the different other builds of Anvil that I've tried, because a lot of them have a lot of potential, but this has definitely felt like the most streamlined, the most consistent build, and I think Invoke Despair is such an important card right now, particularly in the Anvil deck, because it deals with so many cards that Anvil struggles to deal with. And honestly, having tested a bunch of other decks, I think the best decks in the format right now, you know, there's a lot of different ways you can build them, but are the decks that are running 4 Fable, 4 Crucias. I think these are just by far and away the best cards in the format right now, and this feels like a really good shell to maximise that as well. Now onto the sideboard, I've got 3 copies of Unlicensed Hearse's Graveyard Hate, so 3 might seem quite a lot, but the Jund Reanimator deck that I've seen an uptick of recently is, like, it's difficult to beat if they get their early reanimation starts. You know, if they can reanimate a Titan of Industry or the Witch, I can't remember the name of, the 6-mana Witch, then it's difficult to come back from those sorts of games. So getting a Hearse down on turn 2 or 3 to stop them reanimating a card often buys you enough time. You know, if the opponent is having to hardcast their reanimation spells, then the matchup's a lot easier. So shutting that off in the early game is really important. There's also still the Oracle of the Alpha decks that are trying to loop Time Walk from the graveyard, and this is obviously very good there as well. And there are also some other cards where Hearse is decent as well, you know, against Kaleem, or just random Grixis decks running Cyber Siphoner, or the Jarsil, I can't remember the name of it, the Gruul 3-drop, this is also decent there as well. But this is mainly here, you know, the only matchups where I really bring all 3 of these in are against Reanimator and the Oracle of the Alpha decks. Now, obviously, this is a card that does have diminishing returns. You know, drawing a second copy of this doesn't really do much once you already have the first one in play, but we have so many ways to discard. You know, we have Crucias, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, the blood tokens off Sanguine Brushstroke and Blood Tithe Harvester, so drawing a second one really isn't much of an issue because we can always just cycle it away. And we've got 2 copies of Brotherhood's End, so this is predominantly here for the go-wide aggro decks, you know, mainly mono-red and mono-red goblins. But if the opponent's playing like soldiers or humans or something like that, this is also going to be good there as well. Typically, don't bring this in to deal with artifacts. You know, the only matchups where you would really want to deal with artifacts is the mirror match, and the only situations where Brotherhood's End is good in the mirror match is if you're pretty far behind or the opponent happens to have a draw with like 3 or 4 anvils. So in general, I'm not a big fan of this in the mirror match, but as a way to, you know, slow down the fast starts from decks like mono red and goblins, this is a really, really important card, particularly against goblins. And we've got 2 copies of Nixilis, so this is here primarily for the mirror match. This card is super, super good in the mirror match because, like I said earlier, Anvil as a deck struggles to attack down planeswalkers because your creatures are pretty small. So if you can casualty this, minus to create a devil, and then start plussing every turn, it basically makes it impossible for the opponents to drain you out. And like I said, the 2 ways that you win with this deck are either draining out or on card advantage. And if you can stop the opponent from draining you out, you force them to have to beat you on card advantage, which is a lot more difficult for them to do. So, you know, if you can casualty this and defend it, you're gaining 4 life every turn, and the opponent is essentially losing 4 life while having to discard cards. So very good in the mirror match, and also very good against the controlling decks. Now, control in general hasn't been that popular on ladder, but decks that are running Divine Purge and Farewell as a way to hate out Anvil decks, you know, Omnixis is very good in those sorts of matchups because it dodges their sweepers like Divine Purge or Farewell. Now, some of those decks are running Diviner of Fates, and Omnixis is a lot worse if the opponent does have Diviner of Fates in play, because the first discard they get off the plus just allows them to seek another card, but they're not always going to have Diviner of Fates, and you have multiple ways to kill it as well. So that's not been too much of an issue. And like I said, you know, the control decks in general really struggle to deal with this, and it dodges Divine Purge and stuff, which is very good. So very nice in the mirror match and against control. We've got 4 copies of Voltage Surge. So this is basically for any matchup where we want additional spot removal, you know, against aggro, against any creature deck where we want more spot removal, because one of the big weaknesses of Invoke Despair is if the opponent does go wide with creatures, you know, the opponent chooses which creature to sacrifice, right? So if the opponent is more going wide, Voltage Surge is a lot better, and, you know, Voltage Surge in conjunction with Go for the Throat and Brotherhood's End gives you really nice coverage against those go wide creature decks. Then we've got 4 copies of Shieldred. So first of all, this is here for the mirror match. This, you know, this is incredibly good in the mirror match. Same thing with Omnixis. If you get Shieldred in play and the opponent can't kill it, it basically makes it impossible for them to beat you by draining you out. So it forces them to beat you on card advantage, but they also have to defend their own life total from the Shieldred as well. So if you can get a Shieldred to stick in the mirror match, you're basically odds-on favourites to win. And Shieldred is obviously really, really good against aggro as well. Same sort of thing. If you can get this in play and start gaining 2 life every draw step, or every time you draw off something like a Deadly Dispute or you know, one of your blood tokens, then that just basically puts the game out of reach for the aggro decks. And also, you know, a really nice thing with Shieldred and Crucias is, in the matchups where we bring Shieldred in, we almost always board Invoke Despair out. And since we don't have any cards that are more expensive than Shieldred, if we have a Crucias in play and we discard a 3-drop, we can tutor up the Shieldred, which is really nice in the matchups where we want it. So against aggro, you know, I typically board in 4 Shieldred in place of the Invoke Despair, 4 Voltage Surge in place of the Deadly Dispute, because Deadly Dispute is kind of a card that's spinning your wheels, which you don't often have time to do, and the ramp is less relevant when we don't have Invoke Despair in the deck. And then if the opponent's on a go wide deck, I also tend to board in 2 Brotherhood's End over 2 Fable of the Mirror Breaker, so pretty clean sideboarding. I do think the main deck is slightly softer against the aggro decks. You can still win that matchup fairly handily, but if you end up with hands with multiple Invoke Despairs, it can be rough. But that's the main reason why I've got a lot of cards for aggro post sideboard, just to make sure that we're really guaranteed to win those matchups as often as possible. So anyway, that's the deck. I've been really impressed with it. You know, like I said, I've tried out so many different shells with Anvil, and I think this is definitely the best so far. You know, it's so much more streamlined. Mana base isn't painful like in the 3-color decks. Super consistent. Can find Invoke Despair to play on turn 4 really, really consistently, which is such a big way to shut off the opponent's fast starts and to pull you ahead as well. So I've been really impressed with this build of the deck. Next up, I've got some gameplay so you guys can see the deck in action. I've just got 5 matches that I was playing on the ladder. If you've got any questions about the deck at all, definitely let me know in the comments, and I hope you enjoy the gameplay. Big up. Okay, sweet. Here we go. Okay, so we're going first here. And yeah, this hand looks great. You know, Harvester on turn 2 into either Brushstroke or Deadly Dispute on 3 is a really nice curve out here. And we get a Scry off the Forsaken Crossroads, which is pretty nice. So opponent's thinking about their mulligan. So on Crossroads, you know, I could potentially see an argument for playing this on red so that we don't have to take damage off the Sulphurous Springs. But because we've got 4 Invoke Despair in the deck, I think we want to go on black, just because then if we draw a Mountain or a Sokenzan, then we want to still be able to cast Invoke Despair. Now, I was pretty tempted to keep that land on top there because we do want to keep curving out, but we have so many ways to guarantee that we hit our our 4th land, you know, in stuff like Deadly Dispute and the blood tokens. So I think I like bottoming a land there because I'm pretty confident I'm not going to struggle to hit lands with what we've got in hand already. Okay, so it looks like opponent's on Grixis. Okay, they braid the Blood Tithe Harvester, so that's fine. Okay, we draw another land. We can just play the Brushstroke out here, you know. Want to keep applying pressure here. You know, we could have gone for Dispute, but it's less mana efficient. And in general, I like getting the Brushstroke in play before sacrificing the blood tokens, just so we get extra damage in that way, if that makes sense. Okay, so opponent plays Crossroads and they scry off it. Okay, they scry to the bottom. Ooh, okay, Invoke Despair is really nice there. So I have to imagine the opponent's holding up some sort of interaction here. I'm going to play this Crossroads on red just because, you know, we already have enough black for Invoke Despair already, so we don't have to worry. I don't want to play Deadly Dispute during our turn because if they do have a counterspell, for example, then I want them to use it during their turn so they have less mana going into our turn. So we'll go for Deadly Dispute here, see if they counter it or not. You know, I have to imagine they're running counter spells in Grixis. A lot of them are. Okay, interesting. So I think I'm going to lead on Fable here. You know, I can't remember the name of the counter spell, but the main one that they run is a 2-mana one that counters target spell unless you pay 2 mana. And I'm going for the Fable first, you know, instead of Crucias. I assume they counter this if they haven't played anything so far. Oh, wow. Okay, I'm really surprised to see that. I guess they have a removal spell for the Crucias here. Oh, wow, they just cycle Xanderzan. Okay, perfect. So now we get to activate Crucias as well. I think we'll just pitch the Deadly Dispute and get a card with Greater. Okay, sick. Another Invoke Despair. So now we're in a really sick position. We're really far ahead on board, and we have 2 Invoke Despairs in hand as well. Okay, they Molten Impact the Crucias, which is a bit annoying because if they have another spell, they can use the excess damage to kill Blood Artist, which is a little bit annoying. But it looks like the opponent's just going to play Crucias. Okay, they're playing Siphoner, which is worth noting, because that is a card where I often board in on License Hearse against. So I'm going to lead on Invoke Despair here. You know, Invoke Despairing a Crucias is so good. You know, and obviously getting to draw 2. Actually, wait, thinking about it, I think I did misplay slightly. It's probably unlikely for them to be playing Spell Pierce in the main deck, but I should have probably played that land beforehand so that we can pay for Spell Pierce had they had it. I get to attack him with the 2-2 here, create a treasure token, and then I think we'll just pass the turn back here. Still holding Go for the Throat up in case they play something we want to be able to kill, and we've got Invoke Despair as well. So I like, we're so far ahead at this point, and they're not playing white, so we don't have to worry about Farewell or anything. I guess the main card we could be worried about is Brotherhood's End, but I don't really think that's going to be a main deck card in Grixis midrange. Okay, so opponent's tapping. Okay, so this has to be Invoke Despair, right? If they're tapping the mana like that. Yeah, okay, so that's a bit rough. They use the excess damage to kill the Blood Artist. And then, oh wait, actually, I think, yeah, I misplayed slightly there. I should have cracked, because I want to crack the Blood token here before the end of turn, so I probably should have done that before the Invoke Despair resolved, just so we get an extra damage off the Sanguine Brushstroke, but hopefully that won't end up mattering. So we could Invoke Despair here, but I'm really not a big fan of using Invoke Despair just as a draw 3, particularly if the opponent then, you know, plays something like a Fable of the Mirror Breaker. So I think instead I'm just going to channel the Takenuma and play Crucias, and then we can turn this mountain into a better card and produce a treasure token. Now, if we didn't have any other options, say we didn't have the Takenuma, say that was just a swamp, I think I would probably go for Invoke Despair, because you don't just want to not do anything with your mana, especially when you're this far ahead. But in general, I'm not a big fan of using Invoke Despair as a draw 3 if I have better options. So here we have the option to either sacrifice both creatures or just sack the Fable and give the opponent an extra card. And I think Crucias is such a powerful card that I just want to keep it around if I can. Even if it gives the opponent an extra draw, I'm not too fussed about it. So I'm going to attack first. Okay, they go for the Throat, which is fine. So here, again, you know, since we have another play that isn't Invoke Despair to just draw 3, I'm going to go for Anvil and then crack the Research Desk. Hopefully hit something good off the Research Desk. Oh, wow. 2 Invoke Despairs. Okay. I mean, now in this situation, I'm pretty happy to fire off Invoke Despair, because we have a second one in hand, and it puts the opponent down to 4 now as well, which is pretty sick. We draw another land, and then Anvil can put the opponent down to 3 here. So, yeah, I'd be very, very surprised if we don't win this one now. Now, having said that, the opponent did have a kind of a clunky start, and we did, you know, Fable of the Mirror Breaker and especially Crucias are cards that just snowball the game so hard. So games can often go like this if one player has a Fable or a Crucias and the other one doesn't have an answer for it. But yeah, okay, sweet, we got there, nice. So against Grixis, I mean, we did see Cyber Siphoner, so I think I'm going to bring in 1 Hearse and cut 1 Invoke Despair. Just because, you know, Siphon is the only card that we really saw that interacts with the graveyard. I don't think we want more than 1. I think, you know, the first copy of Unlicensed Hearse is a lot better than the second or third copy. Now, the reason I've got it in the sideboard is because Jund Reanimator is a deck that I've struggled to beat if they can get their early reanimation off, and so I want to maximise my chance of drawing Unlicensed Hearse in that matchup. And it's also really important against the Oracle of the Alpha decks as well. You know, being able to shut them off, looping the Time Walk, basically just turns their deck from an infinite combo to just a really slow, grindy deck, which we can typically beat fairly easily. But in this matchup, you know, Cyber Siphoner is definitely a card we need to be concerned about, especially because they can use it to get back Invoke Despair. So I like the first copy of Unlicensed Hearse, but I don't want to change the deck too much outside of that. I think Invoke Despair is still a really good card in this matchup. I imagine the opponent's running Fables, so And potentially even stuff like Tasha as well if they're Grixis. Okay, this hand looks pretty decent. It's a bit annoying that we have to have a tap land on turn 1. Okay, perfect. Now we don't anymore because we drew the Sulphurous Springs. So, going to lead on the research desk here, and then we can go Anvil next turn into Brushstroke, and we'll have Anvil online next turn as well because of the research desk, which is really nice. Okay, opponent plays a Crossroads and scries to the top. So we're just going to play Anvil here and just sacrifice the research desk to get the Anvil online. And this is perfectly fine to do. You know, you might think you always want to activate the research desk on the front side, but using it to enable Anvil or Deadly Dispute on turn 2, and then just being able to unearth it later in the game where you run out of gas, and by that point in the game you usually have a ton of mana spare anyway, is really good. You know, you're still kind of getting a 2-for-1 in that situation, so don't be afraid to do that play. So we'll see what the opponent has here. Really want to avoid, you know, Crucias is really, really difficult to play around. Like, honestly, Crucias is a card that snowballs the game so hard and punishes you for tapping out on turn 2, which is like, yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. Okay, they do have the Fable, which is annoying. Okay, sick. We drew Invoke Despair. I mean, thankfully we can produce 2, you know, we can sacrifice the blood token here to produce another 1/1, which then enables us to trade with the 2/2 here. You know, just to stop them getting treasure tokens every single turn. And then we've got the Invoke Despair for the Reflection as well, which is nice. Just got to try and keep drawing lands, hit our 5th land if we can. But I mean, even if the opponent does get ahead on card advantage with stuff like Fable, we have 2 Sanguine Brushstrokes and an Anvil, which is going to add up. You know, that's going to deal a lot of direct damage. So even if the opponent does start pulling ahead on card advantage, we can still potentially eke out a win off Sanguine Brushstroke and Anvil. You know, that's the strength of this deck. You can still win from behind because you have really good reach in the late game, especially against a deck like Grixis. I guess they probably have Shieldred, but outside of that, they probably don't have that many great ways to gain life. Okay, so they do Molten Impact the Blood Artist, which is a bit annoying. We're definitely going to double block here because we don't want them to keep producing treasures every turn. Now, they could use a removal spell, but I'd be kind of happy with that because it gets rid of the 3 excess damage, because this 3 excess damage sitting there is very annoying when we kind of want to play another Sanguine Brushstroke. We really don't want them to, you know, play like a Mind Spike or a Deadly Dispute and suddenly, you know, deal with the Blood Artist. So even though this is such an awkward play to have to do because it doesn't increase our proactive game plan at all, it's very mana inefficient. I think because Crucias just snowballs the game so hard, we have to just go for the throat it. It is kind of annoying now because we are kind of soft to Shieldred if they have it, but I don't think we're going to start falling really far behind if we let the Crucias live. So I don't think we can afford to play around Crucias plus Shieldred. We just have to take out the Crucias and hope they don't have it, I think. Okay, I was really hoping to draw a land there so we could Invoke Despair the Reflection. I mean, having said that, I feel like they probably have a counterspell here the way they've been playing. But if they do have a counterspell, then that means that they don't get to use the excess damage off the Molten Impact, which is important. But either way, I don't really want to play into their counterspell. If they're just going to pass with mana open, I'll just use the research desk here to try and find that 5th land so that we have the option of Invoke Despair on future turns, and it gets the Anvil back online as well. So even though we're not doing anything super proactive, it puts the opponent in a kind of an awkward position where we can obviously tell they've got a bunch of reactive cards. They don't want to play an instant or sorcery because it will waste the 3 excess damage they have off the Molten Impact. So, wow, they're attacking with Reflection, which is a good sign. Okay, we'll see what else they do here. Okay, they play Viconia. So that's, you know, definitely a problematic card. Even though I think they probably do have a counterspell, or they might just have creature interaction, I feel like we have to go for Invoke Despair here. We don't really have a better option. Because if they do... Oh, well, Dissipate. I wasn't expecting that. But if they do have a counterspell, I would rather they use it now when the excess damage is only going to be killing an Anvil token, rather than, you know, playing a Brushstroke or a Crucias and then having that killed by the excess damage, if that makes sense. But yeah, I'm surprised to see Dissipate. I was expecting to see... Wow, I can't remember the name of it. The 2-mana instant counter-target spell unless its controller pays 2. That also has Casualty 2. But yeah, okay, I mean, Dissipate's worth bearing in mind because I have been, you know, trying to play around, you know, keeping 2 mana open for that 2 mana counter spell. So we'll have to be mindful of Dissipate going forwards. So we're in kind of an awkward position now where, you know, we would love to have more lands. We're basically choked on mana here a little bit. If we can draw our 6th land, that's great, because then that enables us to play 2 3-drops in the same turn. I mean, even as things stand, we can play a 3-drop and a Blood-Tithe Harvester, which isn't too bad, but if the opponent finds a Blood-Tithe Harvester of their own, they can start copying it with Reflection. They also have Viconia with Blood Artist underneath it, and, you know, they could get back Dissipate, they could get back Go for the Throat off Viconia as well. Because they're playing blue cards, they can get a creature and an instant or sorcery off Viconia as well, so even though things are close, you know, this definitely has the potential to snowball in the opponent's favour if they draw well. So opponents in the tank here probably got a few options. I guess, you know, maybe they're thinking about Viconia. And honestly, if I was the opponent, if I was going to specialise Viconia, I'd probably do it now while I'm tapped out, because the risk of waiting and potentially me being able to kill it with like a Go for the Throat is pretty problematic. Okay. So I think I'm going to lead on the Brushstroke here. You know, if they do also run the 2-mana counterspell, I would rather the Brushstroke resolve, because 2 Brushstrokes and an Anvil is going to deal a lot of direct damage, even if the opponent does start pulling ahead on card advantage. And then I'll also play the Blood-Tithe Harvester as well. Now, maybe I should have done it the other way around. Maybe the Blood-Tithe Harvester is more important because it's a way that we can kill the Reflection, which seems quite important, but I feel like Blood-Tithe Harvester is a lot more frail. If we play the Harvester and then the Brushstroke gets countered and they just have a removal spell for the Harvester, that's quite bad for us. And then... oh, whoops. I guess I should have attacked with that 1-1. That was my bad. Yeah, I should have attacked with the 1-1 first, just to deal an extra point of damage. By the way, I feel like from the way the opponents played, they probably have interaction in hand. You know, for the fact they just had Reflection and Mana Up for a while, and they didn't counter either the Brushstroke or the Harvester, makes me think they have to have a removal spell in hand. Oh, wow, okay. March of Wretched Sorrow. Okay, so that's... I mean... opponent is obviously playing that so that they can gain a lot of life, but in these sorts of grindy mirror matches, you can often win with Anvil just by getting ahead on card advantage, and then once you're ahead on card advantage, it doesn't matter what life total the opponent's at, you're going to just chip away at it anyway, so not too worried about the March, to be honest, because I feel like we're in a good position to get ahead on card advantage, assuming the opponent doesn't find something good to copy with the Reflection. Okay, so opponent copies Dissipate with Viconia. Okay, and they specialise... okay, they do specialise the blue version, which I believe gives them a creature and an instant or sorcery. Okay, and they exile the Siphoner in response. So are they going to go for Siphoner Dissipate here? Okay, yeah, they go for Siphoner Dissipate, which is a little bit annoying, but honestly, I'm not too upset about that. If Harvester survives here, I'll be pretty happy. If they kill the Harvester, we're in big trouble here, because they can start copying the Siphoner with Reflection, which is really hard to beat. But if they just pass here and we can kill the Reflection, okay. So I think I'm going to lead on Brushstroke first, just so we deal an extra damage off the Blood-Tithe sacking itself. Oh, I guess, yeah, they do have the Dissipate, which I'm fine with them using that on the Brushstroke. Now we can kill the Reflection, so that stops them looping the Siphoner, which is really important. We can play the Crossroads untapped, and then we can discard the Research Desk here and search for a card with greater mana value. And Research Desk is really great to discard to Crucias as well, because then that's just another card that we can use to produce advantage later in the game as well. Okay, so opponent has an upkeep stop, so I assume that means they don't have any other instants or sorceries in their hand. Yeah, so they get to flash in the Siphoner for 2 mana. Wow, and they can cast it, mana of any colour as well. They don't need double blue necessarily. Okay, so they get back the Molten Impact. I assume they're going to use that to kill the Crucias here. Okay, so Crucias goes down. That's not too bad. And honestly, I don't feel too bad about this spot anymore. Reflection was the thing that was just like looming there that I was really worried about. That if they found a Siphoner slightly earlier, or they found a Blood-Tithe Harvester, that would just start running away with the game. So attack in here, I mean, we're at 18. I'm not worried about my life total as much here. I think, since we have the Brushstrokes and Anvil in play, we want to be applying pressure here. We can definitely race here. So, oh wow, double harvest is really nice. So, I think I'm just going to attack here. Sack whichever token they block and get in for 1. So that puts them down to 11. And then we can play both of the harvesters here, which with double brushstroke is really nice because each of these blood tokens will essentially sacrifice to deal 2 direct damage to the opponent because of the brushstroke. So with what we have in play here already, we have 6 damage off the blood tokens, and then we can deal damage off the Anvil every turn as well. So the opponent's essentially down at like 5 life already. So I feel pretty good about this spot. Now, Brotherhood's End, naming artifacts would be really bad because that would take out the Anvil, all of our blood tokens, and the 2 1/1s as well. Okay, interesting. So they invoke Despair. They kill one of our 1/1s, but definitely not going to sacrifice the Blood Tithe Harvester here. And we do lose one of the brushstrokes, which does mean that we don't have as much direct damage right now, but I still think we're in a pretty good position overall here. Oh wow, okay, they abrade the Harvester. So now things are a little bit more dicey. Wow, they attack with both. Interesting. So I'm definitely not going to block. I still feel like we, with all of the blood tokens here, and brushstroke and Anvil, we can still race fairly effectively. Okay, another land isn't great here. I think we'll just loot again. See what else we draw. Okay, Fable, perfect. So I think I'm just going to attack here, puts them down to 6. And then we get to go Fable here. Now, the card I'm concerned about most here is Shieldred. We're very much... I mean, I guess the opponent doesn't have that much card advantage going on. Okay, they got Siphoner, which is a bit annoying, but I feel like we're probably slightly ahead on card advantage. Oh, okay, I guess they get Invoke Despair back, so not so much anymore, but I feel like we should win the race here, assuming we don't get very unlucky. So they do Invoke Despair us, which does mean that we lose the Brushstroke. Or we could sack the Fable, actually. Interesting. I think we should go for the Brushstroke, though. Even though that does represent some amount of direct damage, I feel like Fable producing the looting and then flipping into Reflection when we have a Blood Tithe Harvester is a lot more impactful, whereas the only real reason that we'd want to keep the Brushstroke here is because we have 1 blood token, which would deal 1 direct damage to the opponent. So I feel like the value of Fable is a fair bit higher here. Oh wow, okay. Sick top deck. So definitely going to pitch the land here, try and find something a bit better, but this should close the game out, I'm pretty sure. Puts them down to 2, and then we can just attack with both of these. We also have direct damage off the Anvil as well. So we should just win. Yeah, okay, sweet. Nice, we got there. Okay, so we're going second here. At least I assume we are. Oh, unless the opponent's disconnected. Hopefully not. Okay, sweet. So hard. Can't keep a 1-lander. Oh, wow. Again, can't keep a 1-lander. Okay, sweet. That's alright. Bit annoying having to go down to a 5, though. And then I think we'll put back a Fable and a Mountain here. Want to maximise the number of black lands we have for Invoke Despair. Keeping a Mountain does mean that we don't take damage off the Sulphurous Springs, but if we draw a second Mountain, that can mean that we can't cast Invoke Despair on curve, which is pretty problematic, I mean, especially in certain matchups. So 2 planes and nothing is weird. I'm not sure what we're up against here. Lay down arms, okay. So I have to assume we're against like a white control deck now. Typically I'd love to slam Crucias on turn 3, but I think... Okay, it looks like the opponent didn't have anything. Oh, wow. Okay, now I instantly regret not playing Crucias last time, because we could have gone Crucias. Oh, I guess we didn't have a way to guarantee Invoke Despair, but we could have digged for one. The reason I didn't go for Crucias is because the opponent had mana open, and having Crucias killed before it gets you any value is pretty bad. You know, the advantage of... what am I saying? The advantage of Fable over Crucias is even if the opponent has creature removal, you still get the enchantment side of it, whereas Crucias doesn't have that, but if they don't have mana up for removal, I feel like the advantage you get immediately is potentially even more powerful than Fable. Because you get the ramp immediately, you don't need the 2/2 to live, and if it survives, it just completely snowballs the game. You just constantly fix your hand. Okay, interesting. So it looks like opponent is... So I've seen some mono white decks like this, where they have a bunch of enchantments and like Wandering Emperor and stuff like that. But it looks like the opponent's running Esper, maybe a slight blue-black splash. I guess if they're running Lay Down Arms, they want to run a high number of planes so that kills bigger creatures. Either way, I'm definitely going to fire off Invoke Despair here. Even though they don't have to sacrifice the Lae'zel, we want to kill the Restoration of Iganjo, I think is what it's called, before the opponent gets value off Chapter 2. So we will activate the Anvil here just to get in for an extra point of damage and then just pass it back. And we've got, Brushstroke and Crucias next turn. Now, the card I am concerned about here is Farewell. Even though it does hit a lot of their cards, I have seen some of these white decks running Farewell. And... okay, they go for the Throat Reflection. So that makes me think they probably don't have a sweeper like Divine Purge or Farewell, or they probably would have just used that instead. Okay, and they don't attack. So we do need to be mindful of cards like Farewell and Divine Purge, but I don't want to completely play around it because I'm still not 100% sure exactly what is in the opponent's deck. And it would be a mistake to not apply pressure just because we think the opponent might have a card that we're not 100% about. So we do get to Crucias and tutor up the Invoke Despair here. So if they don't play another creature here, we just get to Invoke Despair the Lae'zel, which would be really sick. But I guess they can specialize the Lae'zel to reanimate a creature from their graveyard. Okay, they specialize on white. I mean, that does guarantee them a non-land permanent, which I assume they'll play. Okay, AO, interesting. So I definitely think we're going to go for Invoke Despair here. And I imagine they will probably... Well, they'll almost definitely sacrifice the AO, but I think that's still fine. Now, we don't have enough mana. I was thinking we could potentially go Anvil into Invoke Despair, but we would have to attack with the 2/2 to do that, which feels like a bit of a waste. I feel like I'll go for Invoke Despair first, and then if we draw another land, we can just play Anvil and sack a blood token or a 1/1. Okay, yeah, opponent sacks the AO. Hopefully they don't hit anything too good off the trigger. I imagine they, look at the top 7. So, fingers crossed they don't hit anything too powerful here. Okay, I mean, that's not anything that powerful, but in terms of stuff you can get for 4 mana, that's pretty good. So here, rather than playing the Anvil, I think I prefer playing the Harvester here because that then allows us to kill bigger creatures. If they play another AO, we can potentially kill it straight away. And it also enables us to potentially set up killing Lae'zel with an Invoke Despair. Actually, I guess because they've got Reckoner Bankbuster, that's a lot more difficult now. Because they can just crew the Bankbuster and sack that in response. But either way, I generally like getting Harvester into play sooner rather than later. Because, especially since we have, a third Sanguine Brushstroke here to produce our 3rd blood token, that will allow us to kill bigger creatures. Say they played a second Black Land and a Shieldred, we have the answer on board immediately. So again, I am kind of concerned about Farewell, but it obviously it will hit them as well. It would hit their Bankbuster, it would hit their Lae'zel, and we still, Brushstroke and Anvil is a pretty good way to recover, even if they did have it. And again, we don't even know that they do have Farewell. It's probably more like a sideboard card than anything else. So opponent's already down to 10. They don't really have great defenses here, so I'm just going to play the Brushstroke. And then, got a lot of options here. We could cycle a blood token, but I'd rather pitch this swamp to the Crucias instead. We could play the Anvil pre-combat, which seems fine. I'm not sure whether we want to attack here or not. They do have mana for the Wandering Emperor, so I don't want to attack with the Harvester, but I feel like, you know, even if the opponent does have creature removal or Wandering Emperor, we can't really get... Okay, yeah, they do have the Wandering Emperor, but we can't get too blown out here by attacking with these three.
I'm home.
Okay, they do exile the 2/2, which does gain them 2 life back, which is, you know, it's relevant, but... You know, I feel like we're so far ahead on board, and in terms of the life, you know, the life total race, that it's not really a big deal. So we'll sacrifice the 1/1 that they block to the Anvil, get 2 more tokens, drain them for 1 off the Blood Artist, and then we'll put them down to 9 off the attack, and then Crucias will replace this swamp with something else. And now with both of the brush strokes, we have 2 treasure tokens, so we can cycle all 3 of these blood tokens to deal 6 damage, puts them down to 3. So unless the opponent has something really good here, we should be good to win next turn, I think. Okay, they go for Spirited Companion. So we don't have to worry about Divine Purge. I think we should just be good here then. Okay, they go for the Throat the Blood Artist. We'll definitely sack a 1/1 in response just to get in for an extra damage. And yeah, now we can, you know, this puts them down to 7. They go down to 6 off the Blood Artist. So we can win at instant speed here off the blood tokens because of Brushstroke. And we still have 2 Anvil activations next turn as well. So, okay, yeah, sweet. We just win then. Okay, so opponent plus is on the Companion.
Remember your training.
And we'll just cycle away the research desk here. And then probably just wait till my turn so that we're not wasting treasure tokens. You know, we don't have to do it all at the end of the opponent's turn. Okay, yeah, they just scoop it up. Okay, so interesting. Looks like the opponent's on kind of like mono-white control. We haven't seen any blue cards, so I wonder what that is for. If it was just white-black, it would make sense, but... I mean, either way, the only times we ever really side is either against aggro or the mirror match, or if we want Unlicensed Hearse, and honestly, I don't think we want any of them. Invoke Despair seems pretty good because they are running, you know, enchantments and planeswalkers. They're running Wandering Emperor, they're running Restoration of Iganjo. Spirited Companion is a bit annoying because they can sacrifice that in place of a creature or an enchantment, and, you know, they've already gotten value off it, but I still think Invoke Despair is going to be very good, you know, especially because they're running Lae'zel as well, which is another creature that we struggle to deal with cleanly. You know, most of the time against Lae'zel, you basically just have to either, if they're going offensive, just chump block with Anvil tokens, or they'll just keep it back on defense, in which case you kind of need your Anvils and your Brushstrokes to be dealing direct damage because you can't really attack past it unless you build up a wide board. But either way, you know, the main card I'm worried about post-sideboard is Farewell. If we see a switch to a lot of sweepers, like Divine Purge or Farewell, then I might bring in Obnixilis going into Game 3, but I'm still not 100% sure what's going on in the opponent's deck. Like, it looks very much like the mono-white mid-range / control decks that I've seen in Standard, but splashing black for removal, again, I'm not really sure what the blue splash is for, because they're running Shipwreck Marsh over Swamp, so I assume that's maybe they've got counter spells in the sideboard or something. Maybe they're running Tasha or Roscoe, maybe. But yeah, I mean, I think this should be a pretty good matchup overall from what we've seen so far. You know, they're like a slow grindy deck as well, and you know the difference between our two decks is that we have access to the really snowbally busted cards like Fable and Crucias, and we have a lot of direct damage as well. So even if we're behind on board in terms of creatures, we can still force through a bunch of damage because of stuff like Anvil and Brushstroke as well. So optimistic about this matchup, I think. I mean, this is close to a mull. Like, nothing before turn 3 on the draw is pretty rough, but the opponent isn't playing a particularly fast deck, so I think we can get away with it, and the quality of these cards is pretty sick. So if I was against any faster deck, I think this would have to be a mull going second. Undercity Plunder. So in grindy matchups like this, I don't like discarding 2 cards unless I'm really far ahead because, you know, chances of the opponent hitting something that's meaningful is fairly low, and I don't think it's worth going -2 on turn 2 because of that. Out of the cards I want to discard, because we've got Crucias and a 3-drop, I really want to keep 4 lands here so that we can curve into Invoke Despair on turn 4, you know, play Crucias on 3, pitch a Fable or a Brushstroke. And out of these, you know, Brushstroke is obviously a really powerful card, one of the most important cards in the deck, but since we have a second copy... Oh wow, they hit a Blood-Tithe Harvester, okay. I mean, at least that means they don't have instant speed interaction, I imagine. You know, the only thing they could have that could hit Crucias here is Fragment Reality, which we haven't seen, and that would still not even be the worst for us because we'd just get a free Blood-Tithe Harvester ourselves. So either way, I think I'm going to Crucias and pitch... Definitely one of the 3-drops. I want to guarantee Invoke Despair here. But I'm not sure what the best one to pitch is. I think... I think since we don't have Anvil here, I'm tempted to keep Fable. You know, in a board state, if we had Anvil, I think Brushstroke is definitely the better card to keep. But since we are, you know, still developing our board, I think Fable is the more generically powerful card on its own. You kind of need other stuff alongside it for Brushstroke to be that effective. And the opponent isn't running that many creatures either. You know, they're running a lot of enchantments. They're running some number of enchantments. They're not running a ton of creatures, so the Blood Artist isn't going to get a ton of value here. Now, there was kind of some consideration for me blocking with the Crucias there, because if they play a Shieldred here, or like a Lae'zel... Ah, okay. So now I'm glad I didn't block. I was thinking, you know, it's probably wrong to block there, but if you're worried about Shieldred and you've got the Invoke Despair, then I think that is a reasonable line to think about. Because you can, you know, obviously block with the Crucias and then Invoke Despair guarantees killing the Shieldred, but Crucias is such a powerful card. You know, it's already ramped us twice and cashed in one of our lands for a removal spell, so yeah, I think you very rarely want to block with the Crucias, but if I was specifically worried about Shieldred, that could be a situation where I would. Okay, so they lay down arms to Crucias, which is a bit annoying, but we've already got a decent amount of value off it. And I think I want to hold on to this Go for the Throat for Shieldred maybe, or, you know, if this City Stalk Connoisseur starts becoming an issue, then we could kill that as well, but right now, we're at 20, I'm not really worried about a 3-3. Death Touch isn't really relevant against us for the most part, unless we're trying to attack. And then since we got spare mana, I think we'll just pop the Research Desk now to see what we hit. Oh, wow. Crucias and a Fable. I mean, since we already have a Fable, I think I'd like going for Crucias here. Puts them to the test of them having removal. Okay, so we hit another Crucias. I think I'm going to submit 0 here. Play the Takenuma, and if this Crucias survives, we can obviously pitch the second one and get another Invoke Despair. If it doesn't survive, we can just play the second one out anyway. So, since they're letting us go to the end step, that makes me think they don't have interaction, because if they did have a removal spell, they would have had to use it before that point, or we could just skip to the end step and get Crucias. So, I have to imagine they don't have an removal spell here, so I want to utilise my mana here. Okay, sweet. Deadly Dispute is actually pretty nice, because now we pitch the Crucias, get an Invoke Despair, get a second treasure, and now if they do draw a removal spell for the Crucias, or they have like a Laydown Arms, we can just Deadly Dispute the Crucias in response. You know, just to get value off it, make the opponent 2-for-1 themselves with their removal spell. And we still have mana available for Go for the Throat as well, if that's relevant. Okay, they have another City Stalker, that's kind of rough. So we lose another Invoke Despair here. Opponent did time that well though, you know, both times after the Crucias went for a bigger card. So again, definitely not going to block here. You know, even though we're behind on board, we do have Go for the Throat if we do start falling too far behind. And just Crucias just tends to run away with the game anyway. Okay, Research Desk is nice. That's a great card to discard to the Crucias. Definitely going to lead on the Deadly Dispute here though, sacking one of these treasure tokens. See what we draw. Oh wow, okay. That's pretty nice. So I think, you know, there is something to be said about holding up Go for the Throat, but the opponent doesn't run any cards that we need to kill immediately. And so I think I'm just going to run out the Research Desk and the Harvester here. Harvester is obviously going to be sick next turn if we can untap with Reflection. And then we can pitch the Research Desk and tutor a card that has greater mana value. Oh wow, okay, Brushstroke is sick. So yeah, Crucias just soloing this game basically. Oh wow, okay. AO is kind of scary. So they do attack. Definitely not going to block here because, you know, we want Crucias to survive and we definitely want to keep both the Reflection and the Harvester here. Now we do need to be slightly concerned about a life total because the opponent has a 5/4 flyer. I mean, thankfully we can just copy the Blood Tithe Harvester here and just kill the AO, which I think is the best thing to kill here. You know, even though we don't have great blockers on the ground for the City Stalker, we don't have any blockers in the air for the 5/4, so that has to be our priority to kill. Even though it gives the opponent, you know, more cards off the top of their library, I think generally what they're going to hit off the library is a lot less scary than a 5/4 flyer. Oh wow, they only hit a Spirited Companion. I mean, that's obviously got to be great for us. So, I mean, even though we're kind of on the back foot a little bit in terms of life points, I can't see any scenario where I'd want to block with the Crucias. So I'm just going to attack with it here and tutor up another Invoke Despair. And then even if they do, you know, have 2 removal spells for Blood Tithe Harvester and Blood Artist, we still have the go for the throat to kill the City Stalker. So I'm not too concerned about the opponent sneaking lethal out of nowhere because we have the go for the throat here. And if we can untap, copy Blood Tithe Harvester again and Invoke Despair, I think it's going to be hard for the opponent to come back from that. Wow, they're attacking with everything. Okay, they're thinking about holding back the Spirited Companions. I mean, I would just block with the Blood Tithe Harvester. I think I'm happy firing off the go for the throat now. I feel like this is kind of a critical point in the game where we would be going down to 4, which is kind of sketchy. You know, I could see some sequences where the opponent's interaction lines up well and we get punished for going down to that lower life total. And killing the City Stalker Connoisseur means that we can potentially start attacking back now. Oh, wow. Okay. So, yeah, this is the sort of situation where I'm very glad that I didn't let the extra damage through. Because had we gone down to 4, I mean, we do have the Harvester to be able to kill the Herald of Vengeance. But had they had that plus a removal spell for the Reflection, we could have been in trouble. So I think here I'm just going to lead on Invoke Despair. And then we can copy the Blood Tithe Harvester afterwards to kill the Herald. Okay, so we get to draw. We get 2 Blood Artist triggers. Don't think it's worth cracking the treasures for Reflection straight away. I think we're just going to crack the research desk to see what we hit first. Okay, another Blood Tithe Harvester is great. So we can play that and then copy the Harvester. So now even if they find a removal spell for the Reflection, we still have 2 Harvesters to be able to deal with whatever they find. Now we're going up to our 5th Blood token. And because we have the Breaststroke in play, you know, we've already got 5 damage potentially off just cracking these the blood tokens here. So I think I'm just going to pass here. We could attack with the Blood Tithe Harvester. Maybe that was the line. I feel like we're winning next turn either way, so I don't want to risk attacking in and then them having another Herald of Vengeance and killing both the Blood Tithe Harvesters. You know, I think we're so far ahead now that it's worth playing around the second Herald of Vengeance. Okay, opponent's cycling lands. I mean, that has to be a good sign. Okay, yeah, they go Bankbuster. So yeah, we should just be good to win here then. Yeah, okay, nice, we got there. Okay, so we're going first here. And yeah, this looks good, you know. A little bit slow potentially because we don't have a way to use Deadly Dispute until turn 4, but if we can find, you know, anything to trigger Dispute early, we can potentially play Invoke Despair on turn 4 because of Deadly Dispute, which is pretty nice. But even if we can't, you know, on the play, just playing Brushstroke on 3 into Deadly Dispute isn't the worst. Now, we could potentially keep mana open for Go for the Throat here, but I think I like scrying while we have the opportunity now, because waiting until later could be an issue. Okay, so opponent is on a Naya deck, so I have to imagine it's probably the Cabresi Revels life gain deck, which would be an issue if they play Revels here. Okay, no Revels on 3 is really nice. So now we can Invoke Despair before they get value off Revels if they do have it, which is really sick. Okay, so I think we'll just play the Crucias here while they don't have interaction for it. I mean, if they're playing the Revels deck, they're not going to have too much instant speed interaction anyway. And then I think I'll pitch the Deadly Dispute for something greater. Wow, okay, sick. Second Invoke Despair. So now I'm kind of happy to fire off. Oh, wow, they do have the Revels. So they're just going to get completely blown out by Invoke Despair here. This is the sort of matchup where Invoke Despair is so important, because if you're running any other build that doesn't have main deck ways to deal with enchantments, you're probably just going to lose to a resolved Cabaretti Revels. You know, if they play like Voice of the Blessed into Trelisara, and then they have, you know, they'll guarantee to hit Lunark Veterans and they start gaining a bunch of life. It's so hard to beat. So getting Invoke Despair before they start getting value off Revels is so important. So one of the main reasons why I wanted so many ways to get Invoke Despair on turn 4, so that you can turn 4 Invoke Despair on the play, kill Revels before they get value off it. So I think we'll just, since we have another Invoke Despair, I think I'll just fire off the Invoke, like one of them here. Force them to sack the Overseer, draw 2 more cards, apply a ton of pressure to their life total, attack them down to 7 here, and then we can play a Bloodtithe Harvester, and now it's going to be really hard for them to recover. I mean, obviously, yeah. I mean, obviously help that they missed land drops. Had they had the Revels on 3, it would have been more of an issue. So here, we definitely want the Voltage Surge as extra interaction. I think we can go down to 2 Invoke Despair. You know, even though Invoke Despair is super important, being able to tutor it off Crucias is really nice. And oftentimes, if they don't have the Revels, or if you have a hand with multiple Invoke Despairs early, it can be annoying. So I think, you know, you want to have at least 2 Invoke Despair to be able to tutor off the Crucias, but we also need to make room for early interaction to be able to shut off their starts where they have like Voice of the Blessed and Trelisara, etc. as well. And, you know, you could potentially leave 4 Invoke Despair and cut the Deadly Disputes, but then, especially going second, you don't have very many ways to ramp into it. You only have the Fables and the Cruciases to ramp into it at that point, so okay, so I think this is a keep, you know. Maybe I should have played the Sulphur Springs on turn 1 there, and then we can have the option of going double Voltage Surge on turn 2 if we need to. Okay, opponent plays an Innkeeper. So I think maybe we're getting slightly punished for not playing the Sulphur Springs first, because we could have then played the Crossroads on red and had access to 2 Voltage Surge here. I mean, we'll see what the opponent plays. Okay, Inquisitor Captain. So we could kill the Innkeeper first, but I think we'll wait to see what they hit off the Captain. And even though they are gaining life... okay, Ambergris. So that's not something we need to worry about straight away. I think we'll use Dispute here just to get ahead on mana, and then we can start dealing with their creatures next turn. Okay, Invoke Despair is nice. So, what was I saying? Yeah, we don't really have to worry about... Oh, wait, hold on. I think that was a mistake. So we need to play this Crossroads on black to be able to cast Invoke Despair, but I think I should have played the Mountain instead. And then we have the option of going both Voltage Surge without having to use up the treasure. So I think I messed up there. I think I was not focusing. I should have played the Mountain instead of the Crossroads for sure. Because, we could play Anvil Harvester, but we definitely need to kill the Ambergris, and if they play something like a Voice of the Blessed, we also need to be able to kill that as well. So yeah, we definitely should have played the Mountain there. That was a slight mistake. But yeah, like I was saying beforehand, we don't have to worry about the life total race as much, because we can just outgrind in this matchup for the most part. Okay, yeah, so we're getting punished for playing the Crossroads. We need to kill the Trelisara here before it outgrows our removal. And then we also want to kill the Ambergris before they have the option to start refueling their hand, so yeah, that was kind of unfortunate. Should have played the Mountain, and then we could have potentially played Invoke Despair next turn. Now, having said that, I don't think Invoke Despair is particularly good on this board right now, and honestly, I probably want to save it for... what was I saying? Save it for a turn where they have Cabaretti Revels, and I could have potentially cracked the Mishra's Research Desk during the end of the opponent's turn to try and dig for another land, but... yeah, maybe I should have done that as well. So yeah, we could have cracked the Research Desk at the end of the opponent's turn. Not 100% sure. I was thinking about maybe keeping it for the Anvil, but we're pitching Anvil to the Crucias here anyway, so... Although I guess we didn't know we were going to draw the Crucias. Oh, wow. Okay. So we need to crack the Mythic Research desk now and try and find Voltage Surge. Okay, unfortunately we don't. I mean, it doesn't really matter what we take out of these two, because we can't channel the Takanuma from Exile, but now we're in a rough spot. We basically need to try and find a Go for the Throat. Could trade here just to limit the amount of damage we're taking, but we can use Crucias to try and dig for Go for the Throat, which seems pretty important. But if we do take the 3, we go down to 11. If they play another creature, then the Voice of the Blessed becomes an 8/8 flyer, which is just a 2-turn clock. So I think I'm just going to go for the research desk here and try and dig towards a Go for the Throat. We really can't let this Voice of the Blessed get out of control. Okay, so Harvester's not too bad. So I think we just have to really hope they don't have another creature and the Harvester survives. I mean, either way, I'm going to set a stop during the end step, and I'm going to pitch and Invoke Despair, naming Expedient to try and find a Go for the Throat. Okay. You want to often set stops during your end step with Crucias. First of all, if you have Anvil, because you can discard a card, get a treasure token. Wow, okay, sorry, I was just surprised they didn't have any creatures. Okay, sweet. So we get to kill the Voice of the Blessed here, which is huge. Okay, that was very, very lucky. If they had another creature, I think we just lose, probably. But now we can play 2 Harvesters, kill the Voice of the Blessed. And now we're in a pretty sick position. But yeah, sorry, like I was saying before, with Crucias, there are a number of situations where you'll want to set a stop during your end step. If you have Anvil, you can set a stop, discard a card, create a treasure token, and then sacrifice that treasure to Anvil to get your 1/1 token for the turn before your turn ends. Additionally, if you're trying to dig for a removal spell like I was in that spot where I'm trying to find a Go for the Throat to cast before my end step, if you don't set a stop, it will just skip straight to the opponent's turn, which oftentimes will let them untap. If they have a counter spell, they can stop your removal spell, for example. Yeah, okay, so here, obviously very happy that we held on to this Invoke Despair. We get to cleanly kill Minskamboo. And Minskamboo is a card that I've been trying out a lot with Crucias, because it's another card similar to Invoke Despair that you can ramp into on turn 4 that Crucias can also tutor for, but it trades so poorly with Invoke Despair that I'm not super high on it in general. So here we could, we definitely want to take out the Boo token, the 4/4, because that's going to deal a lot of damage. And I think we can start attacking, but we don't want to start attacking with everything. Okay, Sarah Paragon. Definitely want to kill this with the trigger on the stack so they can't get back an Innkeeper. And yeah, I didn't want to pitch the Go for the Throat there because we want to be able to kill stuff like Sarah Paragon, like Voice of the Blessed, for example. Okay, so here I'm going to lead on the Mishra's Research Desk just to see what we hit first. Even if we don't hit anything great, we can still play the Fable. So go for this first just to see what we hit. Oh, wow, okay. Brushstroke is great here. And now I feel like I can start attacking with both. You know, we're at 9. We have a Blood Artist. I think I'm going to keep the Fable. You know, we can't go for any more Invoke Despairs because we only have 2 in the deck. You know, if we had 4 Invoke Despair, I think I would just discard the Fable to try and find another one. Oh, wow, okay. Double Inspiring Overseer is kind of rough here because presumably they attack with both the Innkeepers here, which puts us down to 7. And then we're on a 2-turn clock from the 2/1s. So maybe we're getting punished for attacking with both creatures last turn, but they did get quite lucky off the top. So either way, I think because we don't have any ways to block in the air, we do unfortunately have to use the Harvester to kill one of their Overseers. And then, we could crack a Blood token to dig for more stuff here, but I feel like with Crucias, we're probably better off discarding it to see what we hit. And then if we don't hit anything great, we can still loot it away to the Blood tokens. Okay, we hit another Fable. I mean, maybe attacking with the Crucias last time was a little bit greedy, but I assume they don't attack with the Innkeepers here. I guess we could have got punished if they had a Brutal Cathar, though. They can Brutal Cathar the 2/2 and then attack with everything. So maybe attacking with the Crucias was a little greedy last turn, but yeah, thinking about it, it probably was. But thankfully, it shouldn't end up mattering, hopefully. Now here, I mean, we do have to kill this Voice of the Blessed as a priority, so I'm going to pitch both of these to try and dig towards a Go for the Throat or a Voltage Surge here. So I'm going to Deadly Dispute, sacking a Blood token because we want as much mana as possible. Okay, perfect. There's the Go for the Throat. So with this much mana, I'm not even sure we want to play an extra land out here. I'm kind of thinking we might want to keep both lands to pitch to Crucias over the next couple turns. There is something to be said about maybe holding on to Go for the Throat for the opponent's turn so that it plays around, or if they have something like a Snakeskin Veil or a Tameo Safekeeping, they waste mana during their turn to do it, but I think I do want to start chipping away at the opponent's life total. Again, maybe that is a little bit greedy, but I feel like the longer we wait, the more chances we give the opponent to draw something like a Cavalry Revels. So, and we do have a lot of ways to gain life off the Blood Artist as well. So I feel like we can afford to start attacking without it being too risky here. The opponent would have to get very lucky to really punish us. So here, I think I want to make use of the mana. I'm just gonna crack the Blood token to cycle away this land. Okay, Sokenzan is interesting. So I think I'm happy to just channel that. And now we have, the Innkeepers are never going to be able to attack on the ground. And, if they do start trading off in combat, we start gaining a bunch of life back off the Blood Artist. Okay, Research Desk is really nice in these kind of spots where we have a ton of mana. Oh, wow, okay. Oni-Cult Anvil, perfect. So now I'm not too worried. Now I know we can start getting life every single turn, which is huge. We can attack with everything apart from the Blood Artist. And now we can start really swinging the game back in our favour. Even though they've gained a ton of life over the course of the game, this is definitely a matchup where you can fairly easily outgrind them, assuming they don't get a Revels to stick. That's why, Invoke Despair is so important in this matchup, and why, as long as you keep hands with early interaction, to stop Voice of the Blessed getting out of control, you can just outgrind them in the long game. Or that's the way I've been approaching this matchup most of the time anyway. Okay, Grixis is pretty good. That does allow them to refuel their hand, but I feel like it's going to be difficult for them to win from this spot now that we have Anvil alongside the Blood Artist. So they do get to draw 2 here. It would kind of suck if they drew a removal spell to kill whatever we block with, but if they're running a Revels deck, they probably have to be running almost all creatures for Revels to be consistently good. So, okay, they pass the turn back. Definitely going to start using the Anvil here to just gain life. Going to sacrifice one of the 1/1s so that we gain life off the Anvil and the Blood Artist. Ooh, okay, Voltage Surge is pretty nice. I think I'm going to start off with the Research Desk just to see what we hit here. Oh wow, okay, yeah. Now the game's definitely out of reach for the opponent because we can make a Blood Artist, copy the other one, then attack, use the Voltage Surge. So yeah, managed to get there. Nice. Okay, so we're going first here, and obviously can't keep a no-lander, but yeah, this one seems pretty good. Definitely going to put back a mountain here because you don't really want to sources that can't produce black because then you struggle to cast Invoke Despair on curve. So definitely going to put back one of these mountains, and then turn 2 Harvester into turn 3 Fable is always a good curve out. So definitely going to slam the Harvester here. So opponent's on red-black as well. See what else they've got. Okay, they're on Grixis, interesting. So in a way, I'm kind of hoping they play something here because if they just pass, it's kind of awkward to cast Fable of the Mirror Breaker into counterspell mana. Okay. I mean, of all the things that I wanted them to tap out for, Molten Impact is pretty low on the list because now, if they cast any non-creature spell, they can use the excess damage to kill the 2/2, which is kind of rough. Okay, they got Crucias, which again isn't great. I mean, thankfully we have the answer immediately, which is really nice. They pitched Gixian Recycler, which again isn't a card we're too fussed about, to be honest. Going to pitch the Crossroads here because that'll be entering tapped. And then we're definitely going to use Go for the Throat. I'm going to attack here first just because if we kill the Crucias and they have like a cut down, they might use the cut down before we get a chance to attack. Whereas I very much doubt they're going to use a removal spell before we attack. Then we can play our Crucias, pitch this land and try and find something better here. Okay, we find a second Crucias, which obviously not great, but if the opponent doesn't kill our Crucias here, we can just discard the Crucias to find an Invoke Despair, which is pretty nice. And if they do kill the Crucias, we can just play the second one. So, okay, so opponent plays Corpse Appraiser, exiling the Harvester. Wow, and they don't pick Fable. So they must have got something pretty sick off that. Now, I am concerned that they've got removal. You know, having like go for the throat, killing the Crucias, and then the excess damage killing the 2/2 is kind of worrying. Since we have the second Crucias in hand, I think we just want to continue applying pressure here. If they block the 2/2, we're fine with that. We get value off the Crucias. If they block the Crucias, we're also fine with that because we have the second copy. Now, if they have a counterspell here, they do get to kill Reflection off the excess damage. Well, they don't. Okay, sick. So we get to use the Crucias, and we get go for the throat, which is really nice now. You know, Shieldred is a card that I was definitely worried about before, but now we have an answer to it. You know, I was thinking Shieldred could have been one of the cards that they picked instead of Fable. Maybe they just had 2 Fables off the Corpse Appraiser, I mean. Okay, and they play a Triome. Oh, wow. Okay, that's a pretty sick draw. So now we can play the Brushstroke. And now we could potentially copy the 2/2, but I think we're better off waiting to copy the Blood Artist during our opponent's turn. You know, we can go to the end step, copy Blood Artist with the Reflection. Okay, they just scoop it up. Yeah, we did just get so far ahead there. And we did get quite lucky with the top decks, but... Okay, so looking at the opponent's list, I mean, they are running, you know, Gixian Recycler, but we're not really concerned about that. Oni-Cult Anvil is very good against Gixian Recycler. Gixian Recycler is only really good on offense, so I don't think it's worth bringing in Hearse against this build unless we see Cyber Siphoner. If we see Cyber Siphoner or like Kaleem, then I could definitely see bringing some Hearse in, but just for Recycler, we're not really too bothered about that. And in general, honestly, like the main deck is very well set up for these grindy mirror matches. So oftentimes against Rakdos midrange, against Grixis midrange, any sort of non-Anvil mid-range deck, I often just don't sideboard. You know, the only times I really sideboard is if they're running some kind of graveyard interaction that we need to be able to stop, like Cyber Siphoner, like Kaleem or something like that. And if they're running a particularly aggressive build, we might also consider bringing in some Voltage Surge as well. But for the most part, if we're against just pure mid-range, our main deck is very well set up. Okay, I mean, I really don't like going below a 6 against decks that are potentially running Mind Spike or Undercity Plunder. So this might look like a really sketchy keep, but Research Desk and a lot of mana can get you there. I mean, we've already drawn a Harvester, so we've got a good play for turn 2 already, but Research Desk and a lot of mana, like I said, can dig you out of situations where you're flooded pretty effectively. So even though that was a pretty sketchy hand to keep, I really don't want to go too low. And, you know, it's better to have too much mana because you have so many ways to utilize mana in this deck. Oh, well, they got Duress as well. Okay, so yeah, that's the kind of reason why I didn't want to mull down to 5, because if we get hit by a discard spell and then we start missing land drops, and then that's how you lose in these sorts of matchups. Okay, Sanguine Brushstroke is obviously a great draw, but even if we hadn't drawn that, we could still just crack the Research Desk. We get two looks at something good. And yeah, also against discard spell decks, you generally prefer keeping hands with a lot of lands because then you're guaranteed to be able to cast what you draw off the top. Okay, so opponent has Crucias. Oh wow, they're running Path of Peril. Interesting. So we don't have enough mana to cast Invoke Despair. I think we're just going to crack the Research Desk here and try and find a way to kill this Crucias here. Oh wow, perfect. There's the go for the throat. So that's exactly what we were looking for here. We just get to kill the Crucias, and then we can... I think we're just trying to play the Crossroads tapped here to scry, and then we can just go for Invoke Despair next turn, which is pretty nice. Okay, definitely don't want another land. And then we'll just pass it back. So let's see what the opponent has here. Okay, they do have Invoke Despair of their own. And they get to draw 3 because of the excess damage, so... Oh, yeah, I guess they kill the Brushstroke instead of drawing an extra card. So here, even though I'm not really thrilled about it, I'm going to go for Invoke Despair, just because it's, just the best option that we have. We do want to kill the Gixian Recycler because 3 power is a lot. And it enables us to just draw more gas as well, which is nice. Wow, they're just unearthing both Recyclers. I mean, I'm pretty happy to see that, because it means that their hand is probably all interaction for them to just go ahead and do that. Okay, the second Anvil is great here. So now we can just start recovering. The card I'm most concerned about here is obviously Invoke Despair. And getting Anvil into play puts us out of range of Invoke Despair, because if they have it, we can sack one of the blood tokens or one of the 1/1s, and then... Okay, they're Molten Impact. We'll sack in response so they don't get any excess damage. But yeah, we're protected from Invoke Despair. We can start gaining a bunch of life. Yeah, okay, sweet. We got there. Nice. Okay, so we're going second tier. And I can't keep an O-lander, obviously. Oh, wow. Okay, I think we have to keep this. Picking back one of the Crucias is... Honestly, drawing 2 Crucias isn't too bad, because it's a must-kill threat. If the opponent kills one, having a backup is nice. And if they don't kill it, it's a card that we can pitch to tutor up Invoke Despair, which is also pretty nice. Definitely going to scry here, just looking for a land, I think. You know, with 2 Cruciases, we definitely just want to hit our 4th land if possible. Okay, nothing from the opponent is great. Definitely going to get the Harvester out here. You know, generally Harvester is the card that you want to prioritize playing on turn 2. Unless, you know, if you have turn 1 research desk and you have the option of Anvil or Harvester and you think the opponent has a removal spell, then that could be a situation where I play Anvil first. But in general, you want to prioritize getting Harvester into play. So Fable is obviously good for the opponent. I'm going to go Crucias, pitch the second Crucias to find and Invoke Despair. And then, even though, you know, we don't immediately kill the Fable, if we can find an untapped black source here, we can Invoke Despair, killing the Fable before it flips into a creature, and then we're guaranteed to 2-for-1 them. Okay, so they do Molten Impact the Crucias, which means they get in with the 2-2, which does ramp them. So the opponent is pretty far ahead here, and if we do miss lands, it's going to be pretty rough. Oh, wow, they have their own Crucias. So, opponent is unfortunately pretty far ahead here. You know, a lot of that will have been going first. Okay, they discard a City Stalker Connoisseur. Okay, we do draw another land, but it's not a black source, so unfortunately we can't cast Invoke Despair. So, I think we're just going to play the Anvil, sacrifice the blood token, because we want to keep the treasure around to be able to cast Invoke Despair. And then... going to set a stop during the second main phase of the opponent's turn to kill the Crucias if they choose not to attack. But I'm pretty sure the opponent does have an Invoke Despair now. Unless they're running like Minsc and Boo maybe. Oh wow, they're running Jarsel. Interesting. But yeah, if they pitched a 4-drop and got like a bigger card, then I'm sure they've probably got Invoke Despair or Minsc. And I think if they had Minsc and Boo, they probably would have played that before the Jarsel. So they do cast the cut down from the graveyard. Don't think there's much we can do about that. I think killing the Crucias is more important than the Jarsel at the moment. Now that could come back to bite me if they do manage to chain all the way up to 3 again. But I think Crucias just snowballs the game a lot faster than Jarsel does. So that's the priority to kill for the moment anyway. But yeah, we're not in a great spot here. Okay, perfect. I was going to say we need to draw black lands to get back into it. And thankfully we did. So the opponent now has the choice whether they want to sacrifice the Reflection as their creature and give us 2 draws, or sack the 2/2 token and the Reflection and give us 1 less draw. I think from our point of view, since we are kind of behind on board and we don't have a good way to stop the Jarsel, we would rather them sack the 2/2, which they choose not to. I guess that makes sense, but... we really need to try and find a way to kill this Jarsel now, because it's not too bad them using Molten Impact here because we can just sack in response, but if they can get to their next turn and cast like a Fable or a Crucias, that's going to be really, really bad for us. So I think a lot is riding on this Deadly Dispute here. We need this Deadly Dispute to find us a way to kill the Jarsel, I think. Okay. I mean, there's the Invoke Despair that I thought they had. I assume they tutored that off the Crucias. But yeah, now we're under a lot of pressure because not only do we have to kill the Jarsel, but they're also, you know, we're on a 2-turn clock already. Oh no, okay. So I'm really hoping they don't naturalize now. Yikes, okay. That's really bad because now we have to play Anvil to turn on our Deadly Dispute, which gives us far fewer looks at a removal spell. We really want to see go for the throat here. Oh, perfect. Okay. That was close. So, I mean, we could... I mean, there's something to be said about maybe playing Go for the Throat during our turn to play around like Tamio's safekeeping, but I think it's so unlikely that they run that. I think it's more likely that they would cast something else first, which, you know, if we killed the Jarsil, they might play something different, basically, is why I waited there, if that makes sense. Okay, so we go down to 5, which is kind of sketchy. Okay, and they do have a Harvester. I mean, they are dealing themselves damage. You know, they're already down to 7, and we do have a lot of ways to punish that. I mean, ideally, we'd love to find an Anvil, but we've already gone through 2 of them, so... Okay, Brushstroke's pretty nice. That's a good start. I think I like leading on the Brushstroke here because with this Deadly Dispute, I think I want as much mana available to be able to cast stuff. So I want to sacrifice the blood token rather than the treasure so that we can potentially cast more stuff off this, because as things stand... Oh, wow. Yeah, things are a little bit rough at the moment because if they have a removal spell for the Blood Artist, they put us down to 1 off their attack next turn. So we really want to try and get something else on the board if possible. Wow, okay. This is a tough choice. If we weren't so under pressure on board, I think I would go for Fable. But Brushstroke is kind of enticing right now because the opponent's already down to 6. So we have to chump block with the Blood Artist here. And then we can play Brushstroke, get another Blood Artist. And then if we find another way, like another Anvil or another Blood Tithe Harvester to get more blood tokens, we're putting the opponent down to a pretty low life total as well. Whereas Fable, I guess Fable could have been a good choice there as well. It's actually, that was a really tough call, I think. Because Fable looting off Chapter 2 can help to draw us into stuff to, you know, get on board to help defend ourselves. But we already have the misres research desk as well, so... So, opponent's down to 4. Okay, they cracked the blood token. Okay, so they got a Haunted Ridge off it. Wow, hold on, another Brushstroke. I mean, if we had another card in hand, if they hadn't stripped that land with the Undercity Plunder, we could win here, because we just play both Brushstrokes and then just cycle away both blood tokens to deal 6. But we unfortunately don't have any way to sacrifice these blood tokens if we play out the second Brushstroke. So I think I'm going to crack the research desk to try and find like an Oni-Cult Anvil or a Blood Tithe Harvester. And then even if we don't find anything, we can still cast the second Brushstroke, you know, as like a worst case scenario. Oh wow, we don't find anything. Yeah, okay, I think we just have to play the Brushstroke here and hope they don't have a removal spell. Because if we survive this turn, we win, basically. So we play another Brushstroke here. And so... Oh, I thought they had a removal spell then. So yeah, this will just come down to... So if they have one removal spell, we go up to 6 and we can chump block. So they kind of need 2 removal spells here. Because like I said, if they have one removal spell for the Blood Artist, we go up to 6, they attack, we chump block with the Blood Artist, and we go down to 1. Okay, there's a removal spell. If they have a second removal spell, we lose. If they don't, we win, I think. I was going to say if they have like an Invoke Despair, we also lose, but... Oh, they do have the mana for that, actually. Oh, but they can't cast Invoke Despair now because they're down to 2. Okay, they just had a land. Just gotta hope they don't draw another Go for the Throat or Voltage Surge here. Wow, okay. Doesn't look like they've got it. Sick. So we should win here. I can't think of anything they could have that gets them out of this, unless they have a way to deal 2 direct damage somehow. Wow, okay. That was close. That was a close one. Huh, okay, so Jund Midrange. Interesting. I mean... Jarsil is a card that I think probably warrants bringing the first copy of her. So I don't think we really want more than that though, because it's only really good against 1 card. And then I think we can trim Invoke Despair. I think we still want 3. You know, we can still tutor it off Crucias, but I don't think there's anything else that you really want to cut. You know, you don't really want to cut any of your early game stuff. I think Deadly Dispute is really good in this matchup at helping you pull ahead, as well as ramping into Invoke Despairs that you draw naturally. And I do think I do want the first copy of Hearst. I think the first copy of Hearst has a lot of value, and shutting off Jarsil is going to be very important because they've definitely made some deck building concessions to make Jarsil work. You know, they're running cards that on their own aren't particularly good, like line up the shot. So if we can shut off the graveyard, then that makes their deck, you know, generally worse as a value mid-range deck, if that makes sense. But again, you don't want to be running too many because there's going to be a lot of hands where they just don't draw the Jarsil. So you don't want to go too overboard on that sort of thing. Like I said, the matchups where we want all 3 copies of Hearst are Reanimator and Oracle of the Alpha for the most part. You know, most other matchups, you know, you might bring in a couple, but you don't normally bring in the full 3 apart from against those sorts of decks. Okay, so going into game 2 here. Overall, I mean, I'm much more scared of the Grixis builds than I am of the Jund. I mean, Jund does have more answers to artifacts and enchantments, but having to play around counter spells, especially on the draw, is a lot more difficult, I think. So, I mean, I think this hand is fine for the most part. You know, we've got Anvil on turn 2. You know, there is a bit of a gap between 2 and 5 for Invoke Despair, but we have a lot of cards we can draw, and we get a Scry off the first land as well. Okay, so they Mind Spike us. Take the Anvil. Leave us with... Okay, I mean, I'm pretty happy with that. I mean, obviously, the Harvester off the top helps a lot. Okay, wow, there's Fable as well, so very happy with that. Get to go Harvester on 2. I mean, I assume they took the Anvil just to slow us our proactive game plan down, but since we drew Harvester into Fable, that hasn't really done all that much, to be honest. Okay, they do Molten Impact the Harvester, which, again, is a little bit annoying because if they have something like another Mind Spike or a Jarsil here, they get to kill the 2/2 off the excess damage, which is really good value for the opponent. So just got to hope they don't have a Jarsil here. Okay, they play Fable of their own. And a Carplusian Forest. Okay, so... interesting. I mean, if we get to attack here, we're going to be so far ahead. But I have to assume the opponent has like a line up the shot here or something. Wow, they let us attack. Okay, that's... I mean, they know about the Invoke Despair as well, so if they had anything, I'm sure they would have cast it by now. Because now we just get to Invoke Despair. You know, they lose the 2/2, they lose the Fable, we get to draw a card, so... And we get to keep our 2/2 around. Like, they didn't block with their 2/2 either, so... I mean, we're so far ahead at the moment. And we have another Invoke Despair here, so... okay, they do have Jarsil. So they Mind Spike, taking the Invoke Despair, I guess. We do lose the 2/2. Okay, so that was a pretty good turn for the opponent. I still think we're definitely ahead, though. You know, we have Go for the Throat to kill the Jarsil. We have Reflection that is going to be... We're going to be able to activate it next turn. So I'm going to lead on Deadly Dispute here just to see what we hit. Okay. So smart from the opponent there. They wait for us to use the Dispute before killing the Reflection. And they used it before we drew the cards. You know, had they let us draw, we would have been able to Deadly Dispute the Reflection. Okay, I was slightly too late setting a stop. I mean, does it... I don't know quite what happens if the opponent selects a card but they don't cast it, because the only target on the battlefield for Molten Impact, which is the only card they can cast, is the Jarsil itself. So I don't know if it would stay at 2 or not. They have a second Jarsil, so maybe I should have waited, but, you know, waited till the end of the turn. But I wasn't sure if they could select the Molten Impact but not cast it, and it still go up to 3 intensity, which would have been an issue. So here we get another Anvil down. We can sacrifice the 1/1. I want to keep both the treasure token and the research desk around. I want to keep the treasure token around to sack the Deadly Dispute, and I want to obviously keep the research desk around to activate. Okay, so I assume the opponent... I was going to say, I assume the opponent uses Mind Spike, but I guess they're already down to 7. So they probably can't afford to take the 2 life off that anymore. Okay, so they put us down to 18. We got a Harvester. Sure, okay, so I think I'm going to lead on the Deadly Dispute here. See what we draw, and obviously that triggers the 2 Anvils as well. But yeah, I feel pretty confident about this spot. The only thing I'm really worried about here is Shieldred as a way to gain them life, but okay, that's pretty nice. So now we can Hearse to shut off the Jarsil, then it basically just becomes a vanilla 3/3. Then we can play the Crucias and turn this land into something better. Oh, okay, sick. We got there, nice.